Hey y'all, thanks for tuning into another episode of the Peace Podcast. This is Just Give Me Presence Over Perfection, whatever that looks like. And so we have to choose presence over perfection. And it really is a choice, because if we continue this pattern of performing and pushing and pursuing, we will burn out. And that is 100% the truth. That is 100% what happens when you look at the people that you know, specifically the women that you know, who are at a point in life where they have been pushing and performing for so long that they just are disconnected and they have had enough. In fact, when you look back at the actual studies that are done in the facilities of old, and these facilities still exist, but for different reason, there is a lot of misinformation about women during this time period having mental breakdowns, and there were a lot of medical inventions and medical procedures that were created in that space that weren't safe to get women out of their mental breakdown. And the studies show that the mental breakdown that they were experiencing was related to hormones and menopause and things like this, and also related to burnout. And because we didn't have as much information then as we do now, people just assumed that those people were going mad and that they needed to be taken out of their homes and away from their families. And they were there for sometimes decades to get some sort of treatment to get them out of this psychosis, where they were given medicine that made them hallucinate and all of these things. And really what they were experiencing is the same thing as the modern day burnout that you see a lot of people experience when they've been doing the thing that is pursuing and performing and really just trying to push to the next level. And the thing that we know is true is that when God crafted us and when He created the plan for our life, it did not include any of those things. He doesn't require us to perform. In fact, He crafted us for the exact purpose that He has for our lives. And really, the trajectory of our lives is to uncover and unearth those gifts that He put inside of us and to become better at those things. But because we live in a culture where it's this hustle culture where you have to go, 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 and if you rest, then you're falling behind, and there isn't time for joy, there isn't time to be present in the moment, we subscribe to that and we absorb those messages over the messaging that we've been given by our biblical guidelines, and we tell ourselves that we just need to do more and be more. And then there really is this feeling that when we are experiencing rest, then that must mean that we're not being responsible, because a responsible and a productive human does all of these things to take responsibility for what has been placed on them, either by title or role. And if I'm not performing in that area, then I must be missing something, somebody's missing out on something because of it, and or I'm just being lazy when I should just be moving and performing. And so then we get in this spiral of perfectionism. So when given the option of resting or doing the dishes, we are going to choose doing the dishes because we tell ourselves that when chaos exists externally, then I can't even rest. And that is programmed in us from childhood. It's something that is a message that's given to us through society, but it keeps us stuck in this anxiety cycle, this I'm not doing enough, so I'm constantly fearful that I'm going to be perceived a certain way, this self-criticism cycle where we're constantly looking at what we did today and comparing it to this idea of perfection, and then telling ourselves that we didn't do enough and we fell short in all these areas. And then that leads to burnout. And something that my word of the year, surrender, has done for me thus far, and I've been focusing on that word since January, and we are now in April. almost in April, the end of March. And so for those 3 months of focusing on surrender, I have found that a lot of the things that are burdening me and feel heavy feel that way because I'm supposed to be handing some of it over to God, and I'm not. Because to hand it over to God feels like, well, if I'm handing over to Him and then I'm doing nothing, then am I actually being responsible? Am I actually being lazy? And something that I feel has helped me in this process of overcoming that perfectionist mindset is to say, what part of this is His? What part of this do I need to surrender to Him? And what part of this is my obedience? Because a lot of times we take the whole thing and we say, okay, God gave this to me, so I'm going to be obedient and do the whole thing. But the whole thing is not the obedient part. He gave you the thing, and then He said, okay, I'm going to take this part, and your obedience is to do these steps. So we have to really uncover where that feeling and thought of perfectionism came from. We have to really think about the cost of chasing perfectionism, because it doesn't come free. There is a cost for it. And we have to learn how to cultivate the presence and acceptance and eventually freedom that comes with getting rid of the idea that you have to continue to perform, push, and pursue. And so when we think about where the perfectionism came from, we have to go back to our childhood. We have to go back to the original roots and where they started to grow. And one of the things that you may find is that you grew up in a household where you were highly praised for grades and or doing something exceptional, winning the track meet or the football game or whatever it is, getting into the college that you focused on, etc. But you weren't necessarily praised for just existing, right? Like you did something that was brave, or you processed emotions, or you collaborated and worked with other people. It's just an assumption that those things were expected. And sometimes you may be the child who just really did well in school, and so getting A's was just like normal for you. And so people didn't even really celebrate it anymore because that level of performance became an expectation. All of the messaging that comes from that tells you that, well, this used to be what I got praised for, but now because it is a normal occurrence, it's just an expectation, then I have to do more to continue to get that praise, to continue to get that validation. Because when you're a child, that's where you gain your acceptance. And so when you learn that, then when you get into your adult years, you start to do the same thing. So being at work and performing your duties isn't good enough because that's an expectation. But being at work and performing your duties and staying late and trying to outperform the people around you becomes your goal now because you want the extra validation. And honestly, because the people who are also in our workplaces have their own journey through life and their own conditioning, sometimes they'll place that expectation on you too. Like if you're good at your job, you're supposed to be. And so in order to be praised for anything, you have to go above and beyond, which is really denying yourself and doing more in the performance area so that you can get somebody to see what you're doing and validate what you're doing. And so when you think about what perfectionism is, it really is your fear that you're going to be rejected or judged. And you don't want to be rejected because you have done this thing to belong in your family system, to belong in this identity that has been created around your performance. And so if you let go of it, then where would you be? And a lot of times we forget that the survival methods that we have developed are there to do something for us. And even if it was initially created in us to do something for someone else, so maybe you performed to make your parents look good so they would have something to brag about when they went to the family reunion or family function, now you do it because you have created that identity. And if you don't keep performing, then who are you without all of the accolades and the ability for people to brag on you? And then the judgment part comes with your worry that your perception is the perception of you that other people have is who you are. It is the reality. It is your identity. And you and I both know that we know some really amazing people. And sometimes those people get criticized. Sometimes they get talked about. Sometimes they're treated poorly. And that doesn't mean that all of those things are true. It actually says a lot about the people who are judging them. But because we're so used to that validation creating a feeling of alignment in us. So I performed to do this thing, to show that I'm responsible, to show that I'm capable, to show that I'm good. And now people are giving me the validation that says I'm responsible, I'm capable, and good. I need that to continue to believe those things. And the reality is that you don't. Because what happens when you're an adult and you say, this is who I am, this is who I want to be, and I want everything that I do to be in alignment with who I am, and everything that I'm doing to get better to be in alignment with who I want to be. And it doesn't matter what anybody says externally outside of me, and that excludes feedback, because if you're in relationship with people, feedback is the way that you really refine your process to getting better. But we're talking about the people who are just judging you based on what they see. You don't need that anymore. You don't even require it anymore if you have landed on, this is who I am, this is who I want to be. Everything that I'm doing right now is a representation of who I am, and everything that I'm going to learn and do better is a representation of who I want to be. The feedback that I receive from other people, I have to discern, is that more about them or is it actually about me? Are they judging or are they actually giving me feedback? And if you align yourself with good people, then for the majority of the time, they're going to give you feedback that is just in alignment with who they know that you want to be. Not to judge you, not to shame you, not to blame you, but really just to say, I know that you said this thing was important to you. So here's my feedback on what's happening in the present moment. The other thing is that when you do those things, when you sit in the space, when you become self-aware, when you become super mindful of the survival methods that you have crafted, and you are present in the moment, you're not shaming yourself for what happened in the past, you're not having anxiety about the what ifs of the future, you reduce your level of stress and you are able to be emotionally regulated. So being in the present moment and being able to be fully aware in that moment and fully mindful in that moment helps you to say, okay, what is really going on? And I don't have to accept all of these things that are being said, because I can balance out my emotions based on what is true and what is happening right now, not on what could happen in the future or what this might be attached to. So an example of that is this. I allow my kids to have the emotions that they have. I don't shame them for those emotions. In fact, I consistently tell them it's okay to be mad. It's not okay to be mean because you're mad. It's okay to have an emotion. It's not okay to treat people poorly because of that emotion. So if my child comes into the house and he wants something and he says, you're a mean mom, or you're a bad mom, or I hate the way you do da 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 da, that is him expressing frustration, and he doesn't have the language to actually speak around what he actually is feeling. And so if I were to do this in a way that is not in the present moment and is leaning into my perfectionism, what I'll do is say, okay, in the past, I have overperformed in the parenting world because I didn't want people to think that I was a bad mom just because I had my first child when I was 18. And so it was very important to me to be really honed in on what I was doing as a parent, how I was doing it, and how people perceived me as a parent, to the point where I probably went overboard in certain areas because I didn't, with research and in action, because I didn't want people to have that poor perception of me. But if I sit in the present moment and don't attach things to that past experience, and don't do the what ifs of what if he grows up to be one of those kids who cuts their parents off and never talks to them again, or what if he grows up feeling the way that you feel about certain things in your childhood, or what if he goes to therapy and you're the reason he's there. Like, there's a ton of what ifs that you could process there. But if I sit in the perfect present moment, this precious moment that I have to be right where I am, and I'm fully aware and I'm fully mindful, I can say to myself, he's having a big emotion and he needs help processing that big emotion. And he needs to understand that not everything is going to be curated for his liking. He needs to understand that now at this age, and that it doesn't happen later in life, so that his relationships don't have expectations that people are going to cater to him, or in the workplace that people are going to cater to him, etc. That he becomes responsible for his own emotions and his own alignment with his principles, values, and the spaces that he walks into. And so if I let it be attached to my past, I might be like, oh my gosh, I need to get him to not feel that way anymore, because then if he feels that way, then obviously I'm bad at this mom job. But mindfulness and in the present moment, I can say, I know why he's saying that. And my job right now isn't to go into my feelings and feel offended or shameful because, there is some history around the comments that he's making. But I can say, I hear you. And I know that you're frustrated right now. And let's talk about how we can have that emotion without saying things that are trying to hurt people. Because that is not true. Just because he's saying it, just because that's his perception in the moment, that's not actually his reality. He doesn't really feel like I'm a bad mom, or he hates the way that I am, etc. And so we have to do that in life too. We could have family members who invite us to a function and we don't have the capacity to sit through that function because there are people there that aren't in alignment with us, and we just don't have it in us. We don't have the emotional bandwidth to be there. And instead of just sitting there and continuing to endure, we can say, you know what? I really don't have the capacity to go. And our entire family can call us snobby. They can say that we think we're better than them. They can say, oh, she's changed. Oh, she feels like she's not part of this family anymore. Whatever they want to say about you, they can say it, but it doesn't mean it's true. So instead of framing your answer around what their perception of you might be and freaking out because it might be something less than perfect, when you sit in the present moment, you can say, you know what, they might think that, but that is so far from the truth. I do not think that I'm better than them. I have not detached myself from my family. I've detached myself from things that are too tumultuous for me to emotionally handle. And I'm choosing me and my emotional bandwidth over the drama that situation may create. And so you take yourself out of those survival patterns, and you take off the weight of having to overfunction. You take off the weight of having to overedit yourself to be safe, because that is a learned behavior. That survival pattern, that survival technique isn't necessary anymore, because you're allowed to exist, take up space, and draw breath in the current space that you're in, no matter what anybody around you thinks, no matter if you're pushing yourself to the brink or if you're taking time to rest, if you're leaning into what you actually need. Because the patterns will make you think you have to overfunction and that you have to be something else to be safe. But your safety actually resides in your inner being in alignment with who you are, and listening when that inner voice tells you that it needs something over the performing, pushing, and pursuing. So when we're present, we're able to live an authentic life. We're able to lean into our creativity. We're able to create relevant relational connections, and we're able to be fully seen as ourselves. So instead of driving to be perfect, we have to understand that that is not necessary, but it is what's keeping you from experiencing your life fully. Choosing presence sometimes feels like that is a radical idea, right? I'm not doing that because that means that I'm not considering the past and the future. But choosing presence says I'm in this moment for a purpose, and I'm going to remain in this moment instead of feeling like I need to be doing all of these things to craft some sort of perspective of me that I don't even really care about, because that's my reputation. And though my reputation is important for what people think of me, my character is more important to me. I care more about how I walk into this world. So this week, I want you to pick one activity or moment and tell yourself, I'm going to be fully present. I'm not going to edit myself. I'm not going to plan something else. I'm not going to think about my to-do list, and I'm not going to judge me. And more so, I'm not going to use their list to judge me currently, because I know who I am and who I want to be, and I'm practicing aligning myself with those two things. Take out your journal, write it down. What does it feel like? And I can tell you it is very uncomfortable when you first start doing this, because you're going to start saying, well, if you were good, you would be doing this. If you were good, you would be doing this. And what I'm asking you to do is to inquire, to really assess where that definition of good even came from. Do you believe that those are the things that make you good, insert title here? Or have you just absorbed them from other people? And let those perspectives of what is good cause you to continue to perform, push, and pursue other things instead of being in your present moment. And I promise you that if you're thinking about your job, if you're thinking about yourself as a parent, if you're thinking about yourself as a partner, all of those spaces will benefit more from you being fully present than they do from you constantly overperforming. Perfectionism is exhausting. You're going to burn out. But presence is freeing, and it allows you to fully be yourself. Let go of the patterns, step into the present, and really reclaim your peace. Being mindful one moment at a time to make sure that's happening. So my hope for you this week is that you'll take out that journal, you'll practice that activity, but that you'll also question yourself every time you feel the need to perform, and ask yourself if you're willing to sit in burnout, because eventually that's what's going to happen, or if you can interrupt that pattern by allowing yourself to sit in the precious present moment. Thank you guys for tuning in, and remember that knowledge gained and kept to yourself is selfish, but shared with the world could just be the catalyst for change that they need to break free from the bondage that they're experiencing. Please go to all my socials, follow me there, like and subscribe to this channel, and as always, share this with somebody who you think might just benefit from this knowledge to break free from whatever it is that is keeping them in bondage today. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.